This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Monday, March 30th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future, as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at our VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on and appreciate your staying with us on Africa 54. The United States has the most global cases of menacing coronavirus, but Italy, which has by far the most deaths, has been under strict lockdown for weeks, reported more than 750 more deaths Sunday, but saw signs of hope with a slowdown in new infections. There are now over 720,000 global cases of COVID-19. The World Health Organization says the deadly disease has now spread to over 47 African countries. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says countries on the continent with weaker health systems must move aggressively to contain the spread among early cases and to prevent community transmission. In Southern Africa, Zimbabwe launched a 21-day lockdown on Monday in an effort to slow COVID-19. Officials say security forces may be deployed to enforce the lockdown. In West Africa, Mali held its long-delayed parliamentary election Sunday, despite coronavirus concerns and an insurgency in its central and northern regions. Mali has confirmed at least 20 cases of COVID-19 and on Sunday recorded its first death from the disease. South African employers and workers can expect a new influx of cash. The country's national treasury says it is introducing a new tax subsidy of $28 per month for each worker to employers for the next 4 months to ease financial losses suffered by companies due to the coronavirus. The treasury says it will also permit businesses with revenue of 50 million rand or less to delay paying 20% of their employees' tax liabilities over the next 4 months. Meanwhile, South Africa's 21-day lockdown started at the weekend, and on Monday, officials reported more than 1,100 cases of COVID-19 and at least 2 deaths. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Johannesburg.
The announcement of the nation's first coronavirus deaths gave a somber start to one of South Africa's most challenging trials. As soldiers prepared to deploy to the streets Thursday night for the beginning of a 21-day nationwide lockdown, President Cyril Ramaphosa underscored the seriousness of their task.
The infection rate has now reached 927, and in a few days we could be at 1,500. Our task is to save lives. Our task is to minimize this infection rate, so that we can restore life to the people of South Africa.
South Africans stocked up ahead of the lockdown on Thursday. For the next 3 weeks, no one will be allowed outside for anything but essentials, like food and medical care. As the sun rose on Friday, the nation was at a standstill. Police searched and stopped those on the roads. But across the Rainbow Nation, the scene was different. The streets were quiet in cities like Polokwane and towns like Middelburg, but it appeared some residents were defying the strict regulations and venturing out. This is something that alarms health experts, who have noted that South Africa has the world's highest prevalence of HIV and tuberculosis. And unlike other countries, a different population is at risk. That was also illustrated by the pandemic's first 2 deaths in South Africa. A top provincial official said they were both women, one in her 20s, the other in her 40s.
Another difference between South Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa and other high-income countries is that, in fact, we have many fewer elderly people. So we may expect to see that should the disease become more widespread, we will see quite a different picture with perhaps not as many old people because there just aren't as many in the population. But we really need to be concerned about those young adults with HIV and TB and other conditions.
But Ramaphosa, who described the lockdown as a necessary measure, said he has faith in his people.
But I also want you to execute your task with great respect to our people, with great humility to our people. I have confidence in the people of South Africa. that they are going to abide by the restrictions that we have placed on their lives in order to save their lives.
But his optimism may be misplaced as security forces shut down rogue businesses Friday in Johannesburg's Soweto area, raising worries nationwide that this could be a tough 3 weeks. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Officials in Africa believe that public education is key to stopping the spread of the COVID-19 across the continent. VOA's Salem Solomon looks at how prominent figures are using music as a tool to reach the masses.
Music is often called the universal language. When trying to spread life-saving information about the coronavirus pandemic, African artists are finding that it helps to have a catchy beat. Across the continent, musicians are recording songs about social distancing, spotting symptoms, and of course, washing hands. It's all part of an effort to get vital information about disease prevention to people who might not get it otherwise. Ugandan artist and political activist Bobby Wine starts with a cautionary advice.
The bad news is that everyone is a potential victim. But the good news is that everyone is a potential solution.
He has teamed up with vocalist Nubian Lee for the song Coronavirus Alert. It has a simple and uplifting message. Not taking the pandemic for granted is Liberia's President George Weah. He knows the cost of an outbreak. His country lived through an Ebola pandemic in 2014-2015 that took nearly 5,000 lives. This time, he picked up the mic, warning people that it could take away their loved ones.
It could be your mama, your papa, brother and sister. Let's stand together to fight this deadly disease now. Walk on the wall we live in.
In South Africa, the country on the continent hit hardest by the virus with more than 700 cases, the Ndlovu Youth Choir is trying to bust myths. The young people from the village of Motse know that their friends and families are particularly at risk. In an email response to AFP or Agence France-Presse, the choir director Ralph Smith said, "We are from a community in rural Limpopo province that has a high prevalence of HIV and TB. COVID-19 could have a devastating effect on our community, and because of this, we decided to make a video to dispel myths about the virus and encourage basic prevention." The choir has a simple message for the community. Salem Solomon, VOA News, Washington.
In Middle America, U.S. governors say the worst is yet to come as the death toll and the number of people infected with the coronavirus is likely to increase. VOA's Elizabeth Lee has more.
As the number of infections and deaths continue to grow, U.S. President Donald Trump is extending social distancing guidelines to the end of April.
We don't want to do well and then end a little bit early and have it start going up again. We can expect that by June 1st, we will be well on our way to recovery. We think by June 1st.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has issued a travel advisory for the East Coast states of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut for 14 days in an effort to contain the virus. The governor of New Jersey, Phil Murphy, warns the number of infected people will continue to rise.
Part of it's due to community spread, but a big part of it is we have opened up testing aggressively.
Now a new test will speed testing results from days to minutes.
The FDA authorized a new test developed by Abbott Labs that delivers lightning-fast results in as little as 5 minutes. That's a whole new ballgame. The deployment of rapid testing will vastly accelerate our ability to monitor, track, contain, and ultimately defeat the virus.
Trump says Abbott Labs expects to deliver 50,000 tests daily beginning this week. As more people are diagnosed, state officials worry about what is to come.
We remain on a trajectory really to overwhelm our capacity to deliver health care by the end of the first week in April.
Louisiana has become one of the coronavirus hotspots. Louisiana Governor John Bell Edwards anticipates a shortage of supplies soon.
We think the first real issue is going to be ventilators, and we think it's about the 4th or 5th of April before down in the New Orleans area were unable to put people on ventilators who need them. And then several days later, we will be out of beds.
Louisiana is not the only state in need of ventilators.
That's our number one ask. It's our number one need.
President Trump invoked the Defense Production Act, requiring automaker General Motors to make ventilators. The government is also working with a company that has technology to sterilize face masks. As lawmakers work on getting more supplies, they're asking Americans to stay home. Is it working?
So we're not yet seeing the numbers from the most dramatic steps we've taken on social distancing. We probably won't see that for another week or so.
As doctors wait for supplies, they're bracing themselves for things to get worse. President Trump says the peak and death rate is likely to hit in 2 weeks. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News.
In the United States, President Donald Trump is extending America's stay-at-home guidelines through the end of April, walking back a heavily criticized plan to jumpstart the economy by mid-April. The action comes after Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, said more than 100,000 Americans could die from the COVID-19 pandemic. Meantime, the hospital ship USNS is headed to New York to assist with the coronavirus outbreak. On Sunday, New York State officials reported nearly 60,000 cases and at least 965 deaths. VOA's Caroline Presutti has the details.
Its name defines the mission. The U.S. Navy hospital ship Comfort, typically deployed around the world for medical relief, now sailing to New York City to comfort fellow Americans.
This great ship behind me is a 70,000-ton message of hope and solidarity to the incredible people of New York.
New York City alone has 30,000 cases, and deaths in the state of New York increased by 200 from just Friday to Saturday to more than 700 total. The Comfort will dock in New York Harbor on Monday, and Tuesday start treating patients who do not have coronavirus to open up beds on land for those who do.
No one performs better under pressure when lives are on the line. These are incredible people.
The massive ship, a converted oil supertanker, has 12 operating rooms, 1,000 beds, a helicopter deck, and a full pharmacy. The Comfort's sister ship, the USNS Mercy, arrived in the port of Los Angeles Friday to relieve hospitals in California. This week, the nation's governors were given the authority to call up the National Guard and to activate the Ready Reserve for COVID-19 response. U.S. companies are retooling plants to meet the equipment demand. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has shipped nearly 12 million respirators, 26 million surgical masks, and more than 5 million face shields. President Trump ordered General Motors to make desperately needed ventilators.
It's a very complicated and expensive piece of equipment. I would say more so than a car.
The president says in the next 3 months, the United States will make or buy more than 3 times the number of ventilators than it uses in a typical year. Tens of thousands more necessary in the care of the sickest coronavirus patients. Caroline Presutti, VOA News.
Due to worries over the coronavirus pandemic, European stock markets dropped to the negative Monday after advancing at the opening bell. The decision of the European Central Bank to ask banks not to pay dividends on their stock or buy back shares until October contributed to the dive. Asian markets also fell during Monday's trading session, closing in the negative as investors continued to be worried by COVID-19. Australian markets traded nearly 5% higher on government promises of more aid for its troubled economy. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, the Democratic Republic of Congo's American Football League is launched in Kinshasa. We'll be back.
Hi, hi, you just hi, hi, hi. Nina ukani luka buseni, nachimweo kapena ni malaria. I wanna make you my woman. I don't wanna waste no
time. Show me Mr. Soprano. You know what it is, the bad records. Get it on. Too many haters started, I ain't gonna be here. I'm ignoring the fake track in my pen. Never found. Never found.
Welcome back to Africa 54. With the global COVID-19 death toll surging past 23,000 people this week, accelerated efforts to develop coronavirus treatments are primarily focused on adapting existing drugs intended to fight other diseases. VOA's Brian Padden reports that the medications being tested focus on three areas: neutralizing the virus itself, alleviating some of its life-threatening symptoms, and boosting a patient's immune system to fight off infection.
Older malaria drugs, chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, are being used on a trial basis to try to kill off the coronavirus in early stages of infection.
This drug interferes with the virus's ability to enter the host cell and makes the cell less hospitable to the virus. And then if the virus is not effective at infecting the cell, it would not be as effective in reproducing and creating more copies.
This is a drug combination that President Donald Trump called a game changer, but scientists caution more study is needed to verify results and warn these drugs are potentially toxic. Another drug called remdesivir that proved ineffective to treat Ebola patients shows promise against the coronavirus. It also prevents the virus from entering the host cell and reproducing. Among drugs being tested to treat the coronavirus symptoms is a rheumatoid arthritis medication called Kevzara. This drug relieves the life-threatening congestion in the lungs by reducing the body's immune response that is causing inflammation as it tries to fight the infection.
They interfere with an important part of the inflammatory cascade, which is part of the body's defense mechanism in response to an overwhelming infection.
Large-scale trials of these drugs are underway to test their effectiveness and determine possible side effects that could be worse than the cure. Convalescent plasma trials have also begun in the U.S. to treat seriously ill coronavirus patients. This involves extracting antibodies from blood plasma of coronavirus patients that have fully recovered and injecting them into ill patients.
What we're doing is this low-tech, old-style solution of taking it from people, just like people did before antibiotics were invented.
However, doctors involved in past plasma transfer say it was not effective on the seriously ill and recommend it more for prevention and early treatment. Infectious disease experts say finding an effective coronavirus treatment could take months, while developing a vaccine to prevent infection could take more than a year. Brian Padden, VOA News, Washington.
An increasing number of U.S. businesses, both large and small, are joining the fight against the COVID-19. One small business is changing course from sewing boat sails to sewing cotton masks for caregivers on the front lines. VOA's Arashar Basadi has more.
On the coast of Maine, in an area known for its sailing, the industrial sewing machines that until recently sewed sails now make face masks.
We have the machines and some of the resources to be able to make these right away.
Owner and operator of North Sails, Eric Baldwin, says he and his staff of two learned how to make masks one Saturday morning and moved to full production by the afternoon.
Fun. It's something, something different that ultimately is going to help.
Maine has more than 5,600 kilometers of coastline. Sailboats and their maintenance drive much of the economy near the shore. Business slowed because of novel coronavirus, and one of Baldwin's staff suggested making masks.
Didn't even think twice about it. Knew that I had plenty of work billable work that I could do, but wanted to be able to stop and do this for us to help.
The CDC says fabric masks like these should only be a last resort after exhausting other options. As global supplies dwindle, businesses like North Sales may be the ones supplying that last resort. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
Displaced by years of drought, many rural Somali women and their families are migrating to urban centers like the town of Og. In search of survival, some women like Sahara are starting businesses in a country where gender roles have long defined the workforce. As they grow their enterprises, they are facing pressure from their communities while they challenge traditional norms.
48-year-old Anab Saeed's family used to raise goats and sheep in rural Somaliland, a traditional way of life for generations. But recurrent drought killed off their livestock in 2017, forcing the family into a camp for internally displaced people. When aid wasn't enough, Saeed opened her own business, a field usually reserved for Somali men.
We had no knowledge and skills to work in the city. We're used to herding our animals and also taught our children to herd animals. So when we came here, I started cooking sheep's heads and stomachs to sell.
Saeed is the first woman in her family to run a business, and her restaurant often earns more than her husband, who works as a laborer. But having a wife provide for the family flips Somali patriarchal society on its head. It can also be risky. Deputy head of Ali Hussein displacement camp, Jama Aden, says men can abuse women in the workforce, even at restaurants.
When the women go out from their houses to work and to get a better life, they face more risks, mostly men buying from them. Sometimes they eat and then they don't pay them.
The charity Oxfam says displaced women and girls in Somaliland also face a higher risk of sexual and other gender-based violence. 2 years ago, Saeed's relative was sexually assaulted on her way from the camp to work in Barao as a cleaner. But Somaliland's Minister for Planning and National Development, Hassan Mohammed Ali, says when wives like Saeed find work, it ultimately helps the family.
I think in the first place, if the husband is also cooperative, kids can go to school, and the opportunity of kids going to school and finishing it is actually an asset. And you can count that this will help the family in the future. And at the same time, this woman will learn certain skills and different skills. And that will help her actually to manage, cope with the changing situations.
Oxfam says providing work for women should be a priority as Somaliland shifts from a rural to urban-based economy. For Saeed, opening a restaurant was simply about taking care of her family and putting bread on the table. Neha Wataker for VOA News, Barao, Somaliland.
In sports news, Anastasia Tudiesh reports on the First Democratic Republic of Congo's American Football League. Here's her report from Kinshasa.
Hussein Shafali is out to change the sporting narrative in a country where soccer is king and American football is largely unknown.
I am a huge fan of American football, the Patriots, Cleveland, the New York Giants. Then I had this eagerness. I am eager man, eager to see American football to become one of the most influential sports in our country.
The self-taught coach is founder of the Kinshasa Football League, where he is promoting the sport among young Congolese with twice-a-week practices to develop enough players to field competitive teams. The new league does not have the equipment budget for the protective gear of the hard tackling of the NFL, so they play a variation of the game called flat football, where the player with the ball is stopped when his flag is taken. That frustrates Coach Shafali.
These kids are trained, but they also want to put on the armor one day. They do have fun, but they eventually want to make it to the NFL. The NFL is a tackling party, and there's got to be that contact.
His players seem to enjoy it, and it helps them stand out.
I used to play basketball, but everybody plays basketball. So when you say you play American football, people are like, what is this? It's something fresh that you bring, you know? It feels pretty cool.
Banker Plant Kibadi heads the Federation of Congolese Football, one of 16 African countries to have an organizing body for the American sport.
Like I usually say, we do have our dream being to see this discipline practiced throughout the whole country, and we'll get there.
As for Americans in Kinshasa, they are surprised and pleased. Hugh Matheson directs the American Language Institute here.
What they lack in experience, they make up for with enthusiasm. They love it, and it was fun to watch them play. There's some great basketball players come out of this country, Dikembe Mutombo, Serge Ibaka. But I can see a day when we're recruiting American football players from here.
Matheson is especially impressed by one of his students, the starting quarterback, Hervé Zeng.
For me, I don't talk much, so football helps me express myself. It allows me to release energy in a different way. I will let my actions do the talk.
There is no letting up to the Kinshasa Football League schedule, with a training camp in June, outreach to local schools, and a tournament to create new teams with the best players, all to make DRC an American football country in its own right. Anastasie Tudièche, VOA News, Kinshasa.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.